Call to order a regular meeting of the Normal Town Council for Tuesday, September 6th, 2022. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos? Mrs. Lorenz?
Here.
Mr. Nord?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Preston?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy?
Here. Please join me in saying a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First on tonight's agenda is public comment related to the agenda. And we have several folks wishing to speak this evening. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody briefly the rules and structure of public comment. Or you have up to 3 minutes to share with us your comments and feedback. Please state your name for the record and your address if you wish. First up, we have Carrie Hoffman. Carrie Hoffman.
Good evening. Yep, Carrie Hoffman, resident of Wintergreen 2. Ready?
Whenever you're ready, yeah.
I am sitting here before you tonight asking you to please not fall for the deceit that has been laid in front of you and the mockery Mr. Berrickman is making through his proposal of Weldon, founder of Normal's middle name, to use as a ploy to get the town's vote, as well as Reserve, which is based on, as stated by Mr. Berrickman himself, his favorite drink of choice, the Woodford Reserve Bourbon. I don't believe the town of Normal is a joke, and I would hope by sitting on the city council you would agree with me. My name is Carrie Hoffman, and I currently live in Wintergreen 2 with my husband and our 3 children. I hope this helps you put a face to the name based on the email I sent this morning. 3 concerns: safety, school, and our home's return on investment, which will someday be our 3 children's inheritance. First off is safety. Has there been a traffic study done? The answer is no. According to a town staff member, the average house has 14 routes a week, and with the configuration of the development, it will only increase loblolly 5 to 7 routes a day. 110 homes and only increasing loblolly 5 to 7 routes a day doesn't make sense. So I would like to see an official study done during the school year. Additionally, going along with safety are the poor reviews written by Fairlawn Capital's current tenants. 1 out of 5 stars. Maywood at Speedway. Westmount Apartments, 2.8 out of 5 stars. Pinecrest Apartments, 1 out of 5, just to name a few. If Fairlawn Capital's attention to detail in maintaining their current properties is anything like the review of the applications they plan to do prior to renting the 110 homes, then we as a community are in trouble. If Fairlawn Capital is truly about the people and our community, maybe rather than purchasing additional properties, they should take care of their current tenants, some of which live here in our current community like Pinecrest Apartments. Secondly is school. According to a nationwide public school review posted on August 5th of 2022, the nationwide student-teacher ratio is currently 15 to 1. According to ISB, in the state of Illinois, it is 17 to 1. However, according to Prairie Land Elementary, they are sitting at least a 25 to 1 student-teacher ratio. Based on these statistics, we are already failing our children with averages higher than the nationwide average as well as the statewide average. However, we are okay with adding 110 rentals to this community. According to a Unit 5 spokesperson, quote, rental property doesn't typically have the stable numbers that owner-occupied homes have because historically rental homes turn over more frequently. As a result, that can lead to overcrowding that we have not planned for, end of quote. So if we haven't planned for something, how can we be a proponent of something, especially based on the statistical information at hand? Lastly is the deceitfulness that has taken place by Fairlawn Capital since the start. For example, after the Planning Commission meeting on August 4th, it was stated by Fairlawn Capital's attorney that Unit 5 was aware of the proposal. An email response from Mr. Peters, Prairie Land's principal, on August 5th proves otherwise. Quote, thanks for letting me know this. I was not aware of this large developmental proposal. I will also let our district office know as well, end of quote. In following up with the district office, a Unit 5 spokesperson, quote unquote, said things were omitted. At the end of the day, Mr. Berrickman and Fairlawn Capitals has the political stout, the power, and the money to run the little people like myself and our neighbors to the ground. But this is where I'm still trying to hold on to my faith in the power of the goodness and humanity amongst every one of you sitting in that town council position here tonight. Now, please, for the well-being of our current community, use the power to stand for something greater and to protect those of us that currently live here, currently work here, have invested here through our taxes or other means, and have given back here to make our community a better place. Thank you for your time.
Next, please, no clapping in council chambers, please. Next on the public commenter list is Ashley McClintock. Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley McClintock. I live at 1768 Hixie Road in Wintergreen 2. So first, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. While I have many concerns regarding this development in Fairlawn Capital, I'd like to focus my time on the request to dead-end or cul-de-sac Bristlecone Drive. Wintergreen 2 residents have over 40 children in our neighborhood, with over 20 children under the age of 18 living on Hixie Drive and Loblolly Drive. We love spending time outside with our neighbors, riding bikes and scooters, and playing in our yards. The additional traffic from a higher density Weldon Reserve and its R2 zoning has us concerned regarding our children's safety. This street has been a dead end for over 8 years without problem. In this packet I provided, I've given you several examples within Normal and Bloomington with one ingress and egress, as well as examples of long cul-de-sacs and even a potential solution of a split ingress and egress, entrance and exit for Weldon Reserve. We would be supportive of a connected sidewalk to allow for pedestrian and bike traffic, but would really like to limit the vehicle traffic to protect our children. With my calls with council staff, you've been quick to turn down this compromise, but I'm presenting to you multiple examples where this is happening within our community, and I'd like to formally ask you to reconsider. I'd also like to express my concern of the lack of due diligence conducted by the developer, the seller, and town council members. This warranty deed was signed by James Shirk, president and shareholder of Tyhack Development and FLC Wintergreen LLC on June 16, 2022. After doing some quick research on the Illinois Secretary of State Corporation Search, we identified that Tyhack Development LLC was involuntarily dissolved on July 14th of 2017, although they just signed off on this warranty deed. Everyone has been in such a hurry to push this proposal with Fairlawn Capital that the buyer, the seller, and the notary didn't identify the corporation's bad status. I also feel that there's been a lack of due diligence by town council members. We requested a traffic study. We asked you to look at the watershed of the neighborhood, as a quick Google search will show you a picture of how the water is already outside of the retention pond. As well, we've asked you to communicate with the school district on how a large rental community would impact Prairieland Elementary. We have called, we have emailed, and we have texted all of you town council members. I'd like to admit that only Kathleen, Karen, and Stan would be willing to have conversation with us, with many, many attempts to reach out to you. As the mayor and council serve at large, it's unacceptable that more members of this staff did not communicate to the residents of our subdivision. We request that you hear our concerns, complete your due diligence, and then reconsider this development. With a plan to complete 110 property community in 2 years, it could easily be too little too late when the properties or the interstate are flooded, the school doesn't have the appropriate resources to meet the children's needs, or has a forced redistrict, or potentially a child could be struck by a vehicle. Please take this into consideration when you're making your decision tonight.
Next on our public comment list is Matthew Jarrett. Mr. Jarrett, Matthew.
Good evening. My wife Ashley, Jarrett, and myself are moving back to Illinois.
If you would, for the record, just say your name. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought Matthew Jarrett from
Thank you.
1820 Loblolly, 30 days away from being completed. We started building the house in March. We were told what was going to happen with the rest of the subdivision. This seems like a pretty unfortunate set of events that have led to that lot next to us potentially having a different set of rules than the house that we just are finishing now. We're concerned about the school. We just put our daughter in there. The overcrowding, the traffic that's going to go right past my exact house. I don't know if this is even possible. I don't have anything well as prepared as what was done earlier, but if I could maybe get a show of hands of everybody on the board who has 100 rental properties within a quarter mile of your residence. So that's what you're voting. Okay, cool. So that's what you're voting for tonight, is to put that in our backyard, right? And so I don't think, from my perspective, putting 100 rental properties is the right way to address a shortage of homes in Normal. I think that it takes away from people being able to build equity in homes, because these are long-term rentals. These are not homes that can be sold and bought. I think it just delays some issues down the road. It feels like it was all of this was done in a way that was not very, very transparent. I believe the onset, it was said that these were homes for sale, and now they're being told that they're rentals, like the vast majority. And so I'd just like you to factor that into your vote tonight, and I appreciate your time.
Next on our list is Angela Lawless. Ms. Lawless. No, whichever you're most comfortable.
This one's closer. Angie Lawless, and I live in Pheasant Ridge. I'm speaking out against the Weldon Reserve as it stands now. It appears to the public there was a backdoor deal done by a politician with the town of Normal, with land clearing that has already begun, gravel piles, and a call before you dig markings completed. Fairlawn's ready to start tomorrow, yet it hasn't officially been approved. Senator Barackman sponsored legislation to eliminate conflict of interest with the State Board of Election. The senator's own website states efficient, transparent, ethical government. Apparently, the senator doesn't care about conflict of interest and ethical lines being crossed with this type of deal because it's making him money. This appears to have huge red flags for conflict of interest for the senator and how this deal was done. The fact that he flat out lied to the media that residents have come to an agreement with Fairlawn Capital shows that Fairlawn and the senator cannot be trusted. Although I don't live in Wintergreen 2, Fairlawn has forgotten that there's another long-standing subdivision with residents that are backing this intended use. Jason agreed to put arborvitaes between Wintergreen 2, but what about those that will be backing the rental properties off of Chuck Murray? Wintergreen and Pheasant Ridge both have bylaws that prohibit rentals of any homes. Having rentals of this magnitude will decrease our home values and usually has an increase in crime rate. Not only did Jason lie about the agreement with Wintergreen 2, he also said that they could put speed bumps in traffic control. I know this to be untrue because I went to battle for traffic control devices when Bob White Way was made a through street. We now have a drag strip that's almost a mile long. Their thing was that speed bumps are not the answer and that policing was the answer. What about the construction traffic alone coming up and down Beach Street with the increased risk of a child being struck? The truck traffic, the jake braking for truckers, and the fact that the drivers for the GC contractors and town inspectors have a complete disregard that there are neighborhoods with children and pedestrians present, as I experienced with recent construction in Pheasant Ridge. What happens when a child is injured or killed? Who's taking on that liability? There's a bus stop on Beach Street. Who's going to take that responsibility? Is it Fairlawn, the town of Normal, the trucking company, the Project GC? I want to know who. My kids stand at this bus stop every day and have to cross Beach Street. Who wants that liability? There's not been a traffic study completed, no communication with Unit 5, and the impact on the school district for this type of housing will bring. Fairlawn and the town of Normal are not looking at the long-term impact of this development. What about our roads, the sewer system, the green space, the water runoff, the increase of traffic once this development is also completed? This zoning change was only tabled once residents were informed of what was really happening, and even now we are unsure of the true intentions. Why have you ignored the Pheasant Ridge? Why have you not included those that are backing the new rental community with the same things that are those that are backing in the Wintergreen? This is a backdoor deal done with a politician and city government. No one really cares what the residents that have made this community their home and have elected you to keep their best interest when making decisions. This rezoning is not in our best interest of the community, and I implore you to vote no and speak to your constituents before adding a rental community of this magnitude. I will close with a quote from Senator Barackman. Quote, "The public deserves to be able to trust the government officials are working for the people they represent and not their own personal interests. And if not, that they are held accountable." Well, this is me holding you city officials and Senator Barackman accountable for a deal that is not in the best interest of our community. Thank you.
Next, we have Holly Hall. Ms. Hall?
Yes, I'm Holly Hall, also a resident of Wintergreen 2. I built a home in Wintergreen 2 with my husband and 3 children in 2019. Prior to building our home, we did extensive research for more than a year on different buildable lots in the town of Normal. We were sold on Wintergreen 2 because of the plan that TIHAC Development presented to us. A plan that looks very, very different than what was presented at the meeting on August 4th. The meeting on August 4th compared a plan from 2001, which is apparently the last approved development plan for our area. It's a plan that doesn't even include the streets that we live on, the lots that we've built our homes on, let alone the homes that we live in. We questioned that at the meeting, how that was possible, and nobody to date has provided us with an explanation. That led to a gross misrepresentation of the degree of change that Mr. Barrickman's project brings, in that it was presented that only 4 additional lots were being added to our area, when in fact, comparing it to the accurate representation that we all built our homes based on, it is plus 27 lots that have been added to the area. So that's a 33% increase in what we were told and what's now being presented. That comes with a number of concerns, many of which have already been addressed, so I won't go through them all individually. But I want to know how it is that we all live in homes on streets that, according to Town of Normal records, don't exist. How is that possible, and why can nobody provide us with an answer on that?
Our final public commenter this evening is Dane Simpson.
Hello, good evening. Dane Simpson, 1812 Fitzer Road. So my family and I have lived in Wintergreen for 2 years, or for 7 years now. It's truly, I consider it a gem on the north side of Normal. It's full of 2-income, middle-class, Normal residents that really, truly cherish their neighborhood. And I'm having difficulty tonight, and I have 2 speeches given. I had a anti-Fairlawn Capital speech, and I had a speech that kind of bolstered the project, and I really, truly am torn. At 6:55 tonight, Fairlawn Capital gave me a finalized copy of a memorandum, unsigned, with their promises that they hope to uphold for this development. Jason and I went back and forth many times. I made myself more than available to Fairlawn staff, council members, Town of Normal staff, many conversations, and I think what you heard tonight boils down to 3 items. There's a massive concern with water drainage. And I think a lot of these things could have been resolved at the Planning Commission, but they weren't. Legal counsel put their thumb on the scale and said that these are items that the Planning Commission wasn't allowed to take up. They had to vote it based on the facts as presented. And there's way too many questions that we have for this project not to have serious consideration by council members. Water drainage. We dramatically need a study done to see how increasing the hardscapes of a 59-acre development, deterring that water directly towards the northeast corner of their property, pushing it onto Wintergreen 2's development, going north of Wintergreen 2, then coming back south and then back east makes absolutely no sense. In my opinion, there should be the council, the Planning Commission, somebody should be required to have a retention basin on their property in lieu of 2 easements. a traffic study. I've had many, many conversations about traffic studies. I don't know how much money a traffic study costs, but talking to staff and council people, you would think it was $1 million. I don't think it's too much to ask to have a traffic study done instead of referencing a traffic study done in 2007. At bare minimum, average daily traffic count should be done in order to get a baseline sense of where we're at now and where this development's going to take us. Three, and I think it's been brought up by two or three of the different speakers tonight, our schools. Our schools are where our kids go. That's why we moved to this community. Prairie Land is an exceptional grade school. I don't think any of my neighbors would dispute that. There should be concerns.
Mr. Simpson, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up. You're well over 3 minutes.
Okay. What I'm saying is, we don't want you to vote no on this project. We just want you to vote not right now. Let's not rush. Let's not push this thing through. Let's just press pause, go back to planning, get it done right, and present a polished product for the town of Normal to consider. Thank you.
Next on our agenda, we move to the omnibus vote agenda. All items under the omnibus vote agenda are considered to be routine in nature and will be enacted by one motion. There won't be any separate discussions unless a council member wishes to remove one from the agenda for discussion. Mr. Nord.
I'd like to remove item D as in David and E as in Edward.
Your first one again?
D as in David.
Thank you. All right. Tonight on our omnibus vote agenda is a report to receive and file town of normal expenditures as of for payment as of August 31st, 2022. You pulled D and E.
Correct.
Let's try that again. Didn't get to agenda 2 and I'm making mistakes in this meeting already. All right. First on the consent agenda is an approval of the minutes of the public hearing of August 15th, 2022, and approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of August 15th, 2022. Next is a report to receive and file town of expenditures for payment as of August 31st, 2022. Next is a resolution adopting the McLean County Multi-Jurisdictional All Hazards Mitigation Plan. Next is a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with Illinois State University pertaining to fire protection service. And finally, a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with Illinois State University for landscape waste disposal. Please call the roll. I need a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye. And they pass. Next on our agenda is a resolution waiving the formal bidding process and executing a 3-year agreement with All City Management Services Incorporated for school crossing guard management services. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. The reason I pulled this is because this is a 3-year contract and it's, roughly $100,000 a year. And our purchasing policy says that for anything over $25,000 and above needs to be competitively bid, and it gives a couple exceptions. Sole purchase, only one known supplier. There's multiple suppliers out there that do crossing guard services. I looked online and there's several. Some people have switched to this one, switched away from this one. Another one is redundant purchase. Purchase with second item in the same category, basically. This is the only crossing guard service that I know that we have, or it's a replacement purchase, like purchase of furniture, carpeting, or things that have to match. You've asked us to waive this purchasing requirement, but there's no explanation in the write-up. Why are we waiving this $100,000 a year purchase? Or why are we not bidding this out?
I'm taking a quick look at the council report, Mr. Nord. I thought we indicated in the report why we are asking council to waive the formal procurement process. And let me take a look at which paragraph that is. Well, maybe it's not particularly clear. I'm not sure, Mr. Nord, but I believe in the council report, it references how Bloomington, the city of Bloomington, is using the same vendor, which is allowing all city management to have some efficiencies in terms of hiring and assigning staff to various school crossing locations. So if that wasn't clear enough, I apologize, but I thought it was somewhere in that council report. So as we've mentioned in past conversations, the city council does have authority to waive the formal procurement process. And that's why we particularly identify this as part of your action this evening, to waive the formal procurement process and move forward with this particular vendor.
Was there any conversation with Bloomington to ask them if they were going to bid this out and seek someone else and seek competitive bids?
I believe the Bloomington is on a different procurement cycle, so I'm not sure when their contract expires. I'm looking at Chief Petrilli. So I don't know, but I believe their contract expires a different time period. Our contract expired in June.
So then we had no conversation with Bloomington. This is $75,000 more than what the policy says. And, I think that we owe it to the taxpayers to bid this out just like the policy says. The policy was put in place for a reason. And, consistently things come before us and we're not following the process. We also just had a student that was hit over by Colleen Hoos, which I understand there was a crossing guard there. I think it would be good for us to talk to other vendors to see what they have to combat things like this, because I don't know what the accident history is for people getting hit around here versus, using a different vendor. Other communities have looked. This is a standard process, and I'm just not in favor of always waiving this bid process. It's there for a reason. So I may be supportive of it, but without a bid, we're not evaluating anything. We're just going with something because it was convenient, because somebody else is doing it, and that I'm not supportive of.
Anything further? Oh, Ms. Smith.
My understanding is that we went with contracting for crossing guards because it became unworkable to rely on the police department to provide staffing because of the time frame of 1 hour before school and after school and sending police to that. Was how long ago, if you can recall, did we switch from the police to using an outside service for this?
I believe we moved to contracted service in 2018, Ms. Smith.
So this is the first time this has come up for renewal?
No, not exactly. The first year of 2018, we had a 1-year contract, sort of a pilot kind of experience. And then after that 1 year, we asked council to renew with all city management for a 3-year agreement. So it went from we must have a 2-year contract. 17? Oh, yes, I'm sorry, my years are off. So we entered into our first contract with All City Management in 2017, and then we renewed in 2019 for a 3-year contract.
So we've had a 5-year history with this vendor.
Correct.
Have there been any complaints of crossing guards not showing up, and the students having to cross the streets without a trained adult present?
No, we don't have that situation. We don't have unattended crosswalks. In emergency situations, we would send a police officer there, but I'm unaware of any complaints. And this recommendation was brought forward by the police department.
So the school year has already started, so this firm is already delivering services, but without a contract at present, correct?
That is correct.
That's all I've got.
Mr. Preston.
Thanks. At the risk of redundancy, I would like to build off of Mr. Nord's question a little more. I don't, hoping to get a little more clarity, I guess, on that, and for what purpose we are being asked to pursue this waiving the formal bid process. I guess I would like some more clarity to that answer. If you could expand on that a little bit more.
Sure. The current vendor has been All City Management since 2017. Their contract expired. Since they do continue to provide services today, but also serve the city of Bloomington, we have found that they are being pretty effective at hiring candidates and being able to place them where the need is. For example, if they need a fill and crossing guard at a particular school in Normal, they can send a staff over there, and the next day perhaps that same person is covering a location with District 87 or a Unit 5 school located in Bloomington. So they have the more latitude to offer hours and be able to provide staff when they have a greater number of crossings to cover, if that makes sense. So since this particular vendor is serving both Bloomington and Normal currently, we thought there's value to move forward with the same vendor.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Since we haven't talked with Bloomington about their experience, then making assumptions that this is the best solution because Bloomington is using them, I think is, just making an assumption that we've got no basis for. And again, the policy says get a quote or get bids. It's not this council's fault that staff delayed bringing this to us. And you bring it to us after their other contract has already expired. Your lack of planning does not our emergency make is basically what it boils down to. So I would like to see this come back with a bid.
Ms. Lorenz.
In light of the fact that we don't know kind of the timing of their agreement with Bloomington, and I do agree that I'm sure there are a lot of efficiencies that are gained from that. So I like that idea of consistency. Should Bloomington ever change, what's our recourse should we be in the middle of this 3-year agreement? And I don't know if that's something that legal
Sure,
counsel or you can speak to in terms of, can we, what are our options to get out?
Sure. I'll ask Chief Petrilli if he has information about that in terms of the contract, or Mr. Day. I haven't reviewed the specific contract, so I don't have, I'm not privy to the termination language.
Under Section 12 of the contract, either party can terminate at any time with 60 days' notice. So in the event that Bloomington changes their mind and goes with somebody else, we'd have the opportunity to terminate this contract.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord,
No.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye. And the motion passes. Next on our agenda is a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement for preliminary engineering services with Norfolk Southern Railway Company for review of plans and specifications associated with the West College Avenue Rivian Motorway to White Oak Road project at crossing number 480171Y, West College Avenue at Norfolk Southern Railway. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord.
This is a project on College Avenue just by White Oak Road. This design for the road, for the sidewalks on there, for the bike path that's going to be there, council hasn't seen this. It's not included in the packet. The public hasn't seen it. So I don't know what it is we're going to be approving the crossing for. Is this another underpass? Is this an overpass? Is this grade level? You know, what does it look like? How far away from the road is it? Is this going to be a wider road there? You know, all those things I think we should know about before we spend a lot of money for them to review this, because we may not be on board with what's been designed. So where are these plans, and how can the public and the council see these?
The plans are still being developed, Mr. Nord, and I believe council is very aware that it is not an underpass and it is not an overpass, because we've discussed that. This would be an at-grade crossing of West College Avenue, and it's part of what our West College Avenue improvement project that we've been working on since, I believe, council authorized the contract with Farnsworth Group in 2020. In terms of the design phase, in terms of preliminary planning and preliminary engineering services, there's phase 1 design, and then we move into phase 2 in construction documents. I don't know which phase we're in. I'm looking at Mr. Comfort. We are still in phase 1 design, and at this point, we think it's prudent to get Norfolk Southern on board to make sure we're headed down the right path and have their approval. Norfolk Southern is the railroad company that has the rail lines immediately west of the intersection with, I believe it's White Oak Road, and so the designs aren't ready to. They're still in development, Mr. Nord. They're not anything that's public yet.
Okay, I would like to be able to see the designs that we're asking the railroad to approve, because that's the point, is if we can't see it, then how can we approve something that we've never seen? The design for college, that was done, and the mayor is the one that's negotiating all of that. You know, it's not even staff whenever that contract came before the council.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, Mr. Nord.
The contract that you mentioned that we approved 2 years ago for College Avenue redesign.
With the Farnsworth Group?
Isn't it Farnsworth? Whoever's doing the design of College Avenue, whoever it is.
No.
That's something that we have not been able to see what's been designed to know even what this crossing area is going to look like. So that's why I'm not supportive. I would like to see more transparency to see what this is going to look like before we have more money being spent on somebody reviewing something that the council's not even on board with yet.
All right.
Because how is the trail even going to make it there? I mean, we haven't seen plans on that either.
So, I'm sorry, what?
Constitution Trail, how the bike trail is going to get there.
Right. I guess if it's okay, we can ask Mr. Comfort to come forward and talk about the status of design, if you're aware.
I'm going to jump in here and kind of remind everybody listening to kind of the process of this is, fortunately, public officials, elected officials, don't get to review engineering designs before the engineers do. And I don't mean to be flippant, but it can be confusing, the process. And so what's happening here is engineers are getting to look at these plans and make sure that they follow good road construction, design and engineering process. And so they're not available because they're not designed yet, because all the engineering studies haven't been done, and the railroad crossing folks, the railroad haven't had a chance to look at potential designs and weigh in and input. And it's unprecedented that council would weigh in before engineers on a planning process. That's not typically how we go. So I just want to recenter this conversation that what we're not approving plans tonight. What we're approving is payment to a body to review, their engineers to review potential plans. So we're not approving their plans, we're approving payment to have plans reviewed. Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
No.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye. And the motion passes. We move on to our general orders section for this evening. And the first on our agenda is an ordinance rezoning property in the town of Normal, 4.14 acres in the Wintergreen subdivision. Before we get started, Ms. Reese, did you want to?
Do you want a motion on the table?
Please.
So moved. I'll second.
Thank you.
All right.
Ms.
Thank
Reese.
you, Mayor. We have two items this evening. We are going to discuss them at the same time. I'm going to invite Ms. Davison, the town planner, and Mr. Trummel, Director of Building and Zoning, forward so they can talk a little bit about the process and about the recommendation before you this evening. The first, I just think it's important to note the proposed plan does meet code for the size of lots in terms of the code minimum for R1B residential lots. So it does meet or exceed the code requirements for both the proposed R1B area and the R2, which would be the attached single-family homes. The other thing in terms of staff's recommendation this evening, it is staff's recommendation for council approval of the following two items, which are the rezoning, which is the first action item, and then the approval of the preliminary plan, which is the second action item, again, because it does meet code and because we believe it does conform to the comprehensive plan. That said, however, there are a number of items to share in terms of how we've got to this point and some issues that have been of concern. So I'm going to ask Ms. Davison and Mr. Trummel to provide council with the summary, and then I probably will follow up with a few additional comments, and then we'll open it up for council discussion if okay with the mayor.
Thank you very much. And let me know if I'm not loud enough. I always feel very loud, but I hear I'm quiet. So we'll start with just the beginning of this. As I noted in the staff report, the Wintergreen subdivision preliminary plan was approved back in 2001. At that time, the plan was to develop it as primarily R1B single-family lots with a strip of R2 attached single-family homes up adjacent to the interstate. That plan has been expired for a few years, so the remaining acreage within Wintergreen subdivision, which is about 26 acres, that doesn't have a plan on file anymore. So what they're coming through with now is a plan, because you have to have one before you can develop it out. So the Fairlawn proposal that came through the process in August was very similar to that 2001 plan. It also showed, and at this point we're down to only property north of Beach Street. Everything south of Beach has developed out. So this Fairlawn proposal in August was similar to that original 2001 plan in that it was almost all R1B lots with, again, a strip of R2 along the interstate. We supported this plan for several reasons, some of which Ms. Reese mentioned. The proposed rezoning to R2 met the provisions of the zoning code. There are standards set forth in the code when you try to amend the zoning map, and staff found those provisions to be met. And then as far as the R1B and R2 lots went, as Ms. Reese mentioned, those meet code, the subdivision code for bulk requirements, specifically the width and the overall size of the lots. Furthermore, the comprehensive plan itself calls for residential development in this area. This area of the community is considered a high priority for development because it is infill, it is adjacent to infrastructure that was designed and built to support this exact kind of development. It also helps meet a community-wide need for housing. The comprehensive plan also calls for connectivity within neighborhoods, and that's what the plan was showing. That original Fairlawn plan from August was showed 4 more lots than the plan approved back in 2001. So we were quite confident that the infrastructure built in that area would accommodate this because it was built for practically the same plan. It's also very common to have R2 adjacent to R1 in neighborhoods. If you basically look around Normal now, if you look at a zoning map, you would see strips of R2 adjacent to R1 in many neighborhoods. In fact, all of the neighborhoods that have been built in the last 20 years. So at the Planning Commission's hearing, as you know, there were many residents from Wintergreen who attended and several who testified against the plan. And some of what you heard tonight was very representative of what we heard back in August. Key concerns were compatibility of these, slightly smaller lots with the existing lots, traffic volume, school capacity, storm sewer, et cetera, essentially an impact on their property values as a result of that. There was also reference to this plan that the original developer had shown some residents, which we kind of call the tie-hack plan. And that was never an official plan, so it wasn't anything the town, I had never seen it until that hearing. But it basically showed the neighborhood building out with large lots akin to the ones that you see up there today. It basically showed another 86 lots being built in that space. So I guess to kind of bring it back to something, like a simple couple of numbers, the tie-hack plan, which was not official, but it was something several people had seen. It showed 86 lots that were going to be built with bristle cone attached. You could connect and drive through. And then the version that we saw in August from Fairlawn was 110 lots. So it was about 24 additional over that tie-hack plan, but really was very similar to the original 2001 plan. So there was also some definite disappointment on the part of the Planning Commission as to the lack of communication or perceived lack of communication between the developer, Fairlawn, and the neighbors. And so the developer and his representatives did end up meeting with the neighbors a couple times. Town staff wasn't a part of that, but I understand they met twice. And then the developer came back to us with this revised plan that you see before you this evening. And the differences that you would notice would be the lots that are adjacent to the rear yards of the lots that are on Loblolly. Those lots have been made bigger so that they're basically the same size as the existing lots. As a result of that, the developer lost 2 lots in that little area, but the rest of the layout of the lots remains the same, so there's no difference anywhere else. The developer has also agreed to plant a vegetative screen between the rear yards of the Loblolly folks and these new lots, given the subdivision a new name, and has agreed to vary the house plans, the style, and the appearance, and has agreed to restrict the tenant leases with provisions that are similar to those you might see in an HOA about not building sheds or above ground pools or that sort of thing. Now, of course, these are not the types of provisions the town enforces. Those are private. So here we are tonight looking at this new version of the plan, which differs from the August plan basically by having 2 fewer lots. We certainly continue to support it. Again, it's really not very different. I realize the cul-de-sac issue is is the issue that folks seem to be most interested in talking about, and it really just does not go along with what our code calls for. Our subdivision code, our manual of practice, and our comprehensive plan all call for connectivity as just kind of a baseline notion of transportation. That's not to say you can't have cul-de-sacs. Clearly, we have them all over the place. But there are standards for those, and basically they're only supposed to be so long and have so many units on them. If we were to put a cul-de-sac on the end of bristle cone, it would basically have 26 more housing units on it than code and the manual of practice would permit, and that is quite a bit. You've seen a couple of variances recently for cul-de-sacs, but the overage has been pretty minimal. It's been, 6, 8, that sort of thing. And there have been reasons like utility conflicts, et cetera. And I guess from our perspective, the plan this entire time, whether it was the 2001 plan or the TIHAC plan, was always to have bristlecone go through for lots of good reasons. So it just seems like the best thing to do. If a cul-de-sac were to be desired, it would certainly have to go back through a process. It would require a code variance, another public hearing for sure. And because you'd also then be creating, if you cul-de-sac bristlecone, then the rest of the development that Fairlawn wants to build now has one access to beach, which means you have like 100+ lots with one access to beach. That's way beyond what we would find to be acceptable. So we're really in favor of keeping that connectivity. We think it could work really well. It's really not the difference between what folks thought was going to happen under the TIHAC plan and what is being proposed tonight is very similar. The number of houses on bristlecone is only different by a dozen, and maybe half of those people would actually go down Loblolly. So it seems like it should work really well. And we do appreciate the comments. We're glad the developer found a way to give a little bit, but we're certainly supportive of what you have before you tonight, both by way of the rezoning and the preliminary subdivision plan.
Thank you, Ms. Davison. The other thing I'll point out, just for reference purposes, it might be pretty useful to reference packet pages 710 and packet page 7-12. Those 2 pages are helpful just in terms of looking at what the original adopted plan was in 2001, and packet page 7-12 is useful to look at what this proposed plan is with the modifications from that previous August plan. So 7-12 is probably the most useful item to look at.
Comments? Ms. Smith?
Is there anything in the town of Normal code that restricts a property owner from renting property that they own?
No, Ms. Smith, we don't mandate owner occupancy. Mr. Trum?
No, I just basically answered that to that end.
Okay. And some things have been brought up about the water drainage. At what point in construction is it valuable to have a study of runoff that might be impacted from more hard surfaces being built in this area?
Well, I think Mercy and I, and even Ms. Reese, will probably offer comments with cautions, given Mr. Otto is not here tonight, our town engineer. But that is, I will say, that was the first conversation we had with the developer and their engineer when they contemplated doing these projects late this winter. First things first was what the basin that exists at the corner of the overpass and Towanda was designed and intended to carry the water from all of Wintergreen and then also the property to the east. First and foremost, I think the developer interested in the property wanted to affirm that. And so that was our first conversation with, the engineer of record, which in this case is Louis Shockey and Brown, and they validated that yes, indeed, that basin was designed to carry all that water.
And now...
So that's front end discussion the first time we met with them to even talk about projects, period.
Okay.
And then I guess maybe to the second half of your question is that certainly the manual of practice, meaning like the engineering rule book about how you're going to design streets and water and sewer and drainage, is pretty meticulous and pretty prescriptive about how that gets accomplished. Plans will have to meet that, and the engineer of record will have to demonstrate that that can be done, and then our engineering department reviews those plans to affirm it meets with code. So that comes at the construction phase before any platting of any sort would come back to the council to authorize construction where we start writing permits to build structures on those lots, if that makes sense.
Okay, and a lot has been mentioned about the number of units, and now that you've provided the information about a plan indicating 86 units that the town never saw, but apparently a number of residents did. That was that person's vision for that segment of Wintergreen, but the discussions that the town has been involved in always had the number of units that are presented to us tonight, plus or minus how many.
The version of the plan that you see tonight is different by like 4 lots from what we saw in 2001, if
But-
that's what you're asking.
But for those that had been presented information about 86 units, it's different, but that was, the 86 unit was never something that was presented to the town of Normal.
Yeah, that's correct. And I kind of heard somebody say 83, but the colored version that you see from TIHAC, it actually, the color is a little off. There's actually, it shows 6 lots having been platted, but in reality only 3 were. So potato, it's 3 lots. It doesn't really matter, but it's, yeah, there are about 86 lots on this TIHAC plan that's out there. And the fact that we didn't see it just means it's not official. It doesn't mean it wasn't real to people who saw it. I mean, that's what they thought was going to happen. It is our opinion that even what's being proposed is not that different. So.
And referencing when the original Wintergreen 1, 2, and 3 was in discussion, at that time that came before the town staff, there were studies that looked at the arterial streets and what they could support, and the infrastructure and what they could support, and Unit 5.
Well, certainly in 2001, the whole planning process was public. I would assume Unit 5 was dialed in and, saw what was going on then. A lot of time has passed, but with all neighborhoods that are developing out, they're all, I mean, we've certainly talked to Unit 5, but there are several neighborhoods where this is going to keep happening, where neighborhoods develop out, and, Unit 5 will continue to be made aware of it, but this one's been on the books for 20 years.
And we're talking of a difference in price point between $500,000 and $300,000. So the homes that are being built adjacent will be on smaller lots and at a lower price point.
During the public hearing, well, definitely slightly smaller lots, so it's a difference between, I think the current lots are between 8,500 and 10,000 square feet, and these are more like 7,200 to 8,000 square feet. So they're smaller, but they're still bigger than code requires. There was mention of a price point at the public hearing. We don't get into that. We try not to ask that, but it was said that these houses would be like 319,000 on the lower end, and then up from there. So yeah, that's what we heard.
And just to understand the process, so tonight we're first being asked to change the zoning to officially incorporate the R2 into this design. And then we're looking at the second motion for clarification has us doing what?
Correct. The first action is to approve a rezoning request. The second action is to approve the preliminary subdivision plan.
So how many other times and for what purposes would the developer come back to the council with this same project and/or to the zoning commission?
Planning Commission, only if the developer decided to make certain changes, significant changes to the plan. Ms. Davison?
So right, if there were significant changes to the preliminary subdivision plan or like the zoning, that would have to go back through Planning Commission. If they stick with this exact version of the plan and just want to do final plats to build it, the final plats only come to you.
But during construction, the builders will be subject to inspection of the building process, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct.
And they're specifically checking on the quality of the work for foundations, for plumbing, for electrical.
Yeah, well, all of the infrastructure. So our engineering department would oversee, and our water department would oversee the actual infrastructure of water mains being put in the ground, sewers, storm sewers, the roadways as they're constructed. And then once those are in place and approved, and we're in a position where a final plat comes to council for approval, then permits can be issued for construction.
Do you have a timeline from the developer as to how long he envisions the construction to be
Well,
in process?
Home construction? I think the idea was a couple years. I will say this, been at this for a little while. In our busiest year on record in Normal, we issued 442 house permits in 1 year. That was in 2003, and we've not seen anything like that since. After those few years, there was maybe a stretch where we averaged 250 homes a year. At the end of August, we've issued 87 house permits. We have anxious builders in the queue waiting to do more work. We are definitely dealing with a labor issue. And in part right now, some of the logjam is at the foundation stage. So I guess I was just going to offer a general comment that, and this is just Wintergreen subdivision. We have a dozen other subdivisions in various phases where demand is lots are platted. I would expect we'll probably do 125 homes this year. But
Throughout
again,
normal?
Throughout normal.
normal, correct.
Just in normal. So unless some things change and our labor force changes and things become more available and more timely, it's going to be difficult to build out even 100 lots, in one addition in a year or two's time. Anything's possible, but probably not likely. So I would not be surprised if 100 plus lots takes 3 to 5 years. But again, the market may change. I think obviously we're slowly coming out of some of this stuff, and supply chains are still an issue, even on infrastructure, not just building materials, just water main pipe and different parts of the supply chain. So yes, agreed that there's going to be an impact, whether it's in Normal or Bloomington. Schools are going to be impacted. I think we do want to just answer the question, though, and I'm not shocked or surprised that the principal at Prairie Land School was not aware of this particular development. But we have historically worked with the Unified Administrative Office to make them understand what's going on. And then from there, it's kind of their charge to push their information down to their other schools across the community. The last comment I'll make before we entertain other questions too is and again, this is kind of a no-win. Everybody's a traffic expert in their own mind, myself included. As Pheasant Ridge is a good example. It had 12 different additions in Pheasant Ridge. And so when it was brought to us at the beginning, being nestled at the corner of Linden and Rab, a traffic analysis was performed by the developer's engineer at that time to look at the 300 plus lots that would happen in that subdivision. And as others, Wintergreen or Carriage Hills or all the additions that have developed around the community, depending on thresholds, a traffic analysis is performed. But we don't do or require generally a developer to provide a traffic analysis by addition or by phase. That would be probably cost ineffective. And again, not to say the cost is everything, but there's, the engineer will look at this and say, residential streets are a minimum 30 feet wide. They're two-way traffic, and they're going to dump out onto probably what are called collector streets. So like Beach Street or Linden Street. Then as they make their way to larger streets like College and Vernon, it's a network and it's a system. That's what they look at. They're not going to look at it very specifically and micro-manage inside a subdivision to say, this one neighbor's not going to like this traffic pattern. So I guess that's my general comment about traffic analysis is that, now as other development in the area occurs, absolutely, traffic analysis is going to have to be a consideration. Probably more so about how it would affect Beach and Towanda and other roads in the perimeter of the general development. And that's probably more about our turn lanes necessary or signals going to become, kind of a part of the discussion. So again, that's big picture on traffic analysis. But I just wanted to answer the question that every addition as a subdivision develops doesn't warrant an analysis of the traffic.
And one final question, I know I'm pushing my time limit. As far as Bristlecone, which is one of the street that is contention for a cul-de-sac, that only has about 5-6 lots in the Wintergreen 2. Mm-hmm. It does not connect through Wintergreen 2 to the east. So there is no north, east-west thoroughfare that would invite through traffic into the subdivision. For the most part, all of the phases are feeding into Beach Street, which is a more major thoroughfare. Thank you.
And I guess, again, because the term gets thrown around tonight a little bit, cul-de-sacs. And Ms. Davison pointed out, and I think Ms. Reese did too, about there are limits on the number of homes based on zoning that are supposed to front on a cul-de-sac. One thing I think we want to be careful about, like Ironwood subdivision is a great example, or maybe not a great example, but it's really more about a cul-de-sac to me is you go down the street and it ends in a bulb and you circle back and come on it. What we're talking about a little bit though too are single points of entry to a certain number of lots, so they kind of circle on themselves. And that's what we're talking about with the bristlecone and the Loblolly and Hickside situation, is that there are potentially 40 plus homes that would circle back on themselves and come back down to Beach Street. Many of you, I live on a cul-de-sac. It's a smaller cul-de-sac that's, it's got 15, 18 homes on it. But I think like Ironwood, for example, you can come in on Tawana from the north or the south, and you can go west on Ironwood Drive and encounter 300 plus lots, and you can go right to the east and encounter 350 lots in that subdivision that are not truly cul-de-sacs, but you circle in there and your only way back out is on Ironwood Drive to Towanda. So I think for the purpose of discussion tonight, when we say connectivity is very important, it's the idea is giving people options to not have to cross in front of the same homestead as you're entering or leaving a development.
If I could jump in and add to Mr. Trumbull's comments, we've talked a lot about Ironwood in my 30-year tenure with the town. But Ironwood was developed in the 1980s, and it circumnavigates a golf course. As Ms. Davison indicated, in the last 20 years, we have numerous subdivisions, many subdivisions that have come on board in the last 20 years, and many of them have cul-de-sacs, but we've tried to be more judicious about the length of those cul-de-sacs, and in fact, we now have in code expectations and maximums for cul-de-sac length and number of lots on a cul-de-sac, and so that's what we try to follow.
Ms. Lorenz.
I have a technical question, but before that, I have to giggle a little bit because I do live in Ironwood on a cul-de-sac, and after 28 years, I don't know if I've got enough fingers to count the number of mailboxes that have gone by the wayside. No disrespect, the plows and the garbage trucks are just uncoordinated beasts, so we get it. But at any rate, the technical question I have for Greg or Mercy. First of all, Mr. Trommel, I appreciate your I put it here as Greg's wisdom on traffic. For those of you that don't know, Mr. Trommel has quite a bit of experience, 30 some years. He started when he was 12. And so I do appreciate your insight and experience. So thank you for sharing that. So on page, here's my technical question, on page 7-11, I'm a little confused as to why, which this is labeled as August 2022, why that's still showing Fitzer as a through street. Maybe that's just an oversight, and then that leads to my second question, which is, why was Fitzer made into a cul-de-sac, apparently in and around 2007, and did that ever get approved as part of the final plat for that build-out?
Well, for the first question, I can tell you that I was quite sure I had put the correct attachment into the council packet, only to realize tonight it is the first version, which is not the perfect version, but all the math remains the same, all the calculations are the same. There was a different version of it that I should have put in there.
So let's explain briefly. Packet page 7-11, in terms of, at the time it was Wintergreen 3, that section on page 7-11 is accurate. What's inaccurate is what shows as Wintergreen 2 on that page.
Gotcha.
If you flip over to packet page 7-12 and look at only the existing Wintergreen 2, that is accurate.
That's accurate. Okay, so looking at 12 then,
12
which does accurately depict Fitzer as a 3, 4, 5, roughly five homes deep, 5 or 6. Why was that changed, and did that 2007 plan come back to council for approval?
So at the time that changed, it was still under its annexation agreement, which offered some amount of flexibility, but also if if we determine that a change is not significant enough to amend the preliminary subdivision plan, it can go ahead to the final plat, approval stage. And at that time, that many years ago, it was determined this was fairly minor because loblolly and bristlecone would go through. So, and we knew that the next time, anything major did come through, the preliminary subdivision plan could be amended. So there is that a little bit of gray area there where if someone deviates in a minor way, like there were no additional lots added, the lots weren't crazy different sizes, it was just a slightly different alignment in the roadway.
Okay.
So it was just approved.
We had a
through a
2001
final plat.
agreement, and we had a 2007 final plat,
Mm-hmm.
and now we're up to 2022.
Yeah, nothing's happened since then, official.
Other than the
Mhm.
annexation agreement expiring.
Expired.
Which is
Correct.
significant.
Right, right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and again, as Ms. Davidson mentioned, the previous valid annexation agreement did provide the developer some flexibility with the R1 and R2. And at that time, in 2006, 2007, they made a decision that the demand for the R2 along the interstate wasn't a focus for them. Unfortunately, I would say, for everybody, 2008 and 9 very quickly brought very different times. And essentially, things really just went ice cold.
Yeah.
And so it sat. And then as it sat for probably a good 8 to 10 years with very limited development, the clock timed out and the annexation agreement expired. So even the nice pastel version of the plan that was, circulated, ultimately that plan would have had to come back through the process to get re-energized through planning commission and council. And so, but that, that didn't occur. And again, I think it was as a result of very limited activity for probably 8 to 10 years. And then things were starting to come back a little bit, and then the pandemic set in and complicated life yet again. And so now here we sit with quite a demand on our hands.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Ms. Harris.
You forgot my name there tonight, huh? Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have a question to start, and my question is, I know this is a preliminary plan, and I'm trying to think in my mind and think back times where we've had preliminary plans, but when it came to final plats, something was changed or updated, or even we've approved preliminary plats with conditions to be finalized through the final plat.
Yeah, I think of one. We had at least one in, it was maybe Northbridge or Heather Ridge, where there were 3 lots shown on the preliminary subdivision plan, but they decided they wanted 2 big lots instead of 3 smaller lots. And I think, as I recall, we might have brought that one straight to you and just explained it in the report that this is slightly different, but we didn't think it warranted going back to planning commission.
And I think on many occasions, we come in with final plats as submitted by a developer, and they might have some slight modifications, and we compare that to the adopted plan, and then notify council that we believe it's in substantial compliance. Perhaps very minor changes from the original adopted plan.
So thank you for addressing that. If I may take a slight point of personal privilege to not ask a question, but to share some thoughts while we're sitting here tonight. And you have to present. Thank you. A lot to take in, and first off, I know I spoke with one particular person who made sure that they contacted me. Not sure what happened with others, and wanted to make sure that was clarified since everything here is on the record. So I wanted to certainly acknowledge that those who directly reached out to me prior to today, I will say if it was today, it's a little hard on the same day because I do work. But if you contacted me prior to, as one particular person did, and we stayed in contact for quite some time, I was available to hear the concerns. what is upon me with this, and the reason why I want to take this moment is I hear a lot of the concerns, but some of them also concern me in a different kind of way. Because at the core of it, we knew that this would be something eventually developed. But at the thought of what might be, comes across very NIMBY. And if you know what NIMBY is, it's not in my backyard. Some of the comments that came to me basically said to me that somebody like me would not be welcomed or wanted in your area. And that's been a hard pill to swallow, because I take this community to be very open and very welcoming. And whether you did it intentionally or non, with a conscious bias or unconscious bias, it left me feeling some kind of way. Because you said to me, without you even knowing, I'm not welcome. That I'm not deserving to live in your neighborhood. I'm not deserving enough to be your neighbor. So I want us to be mindful of that. And maybe that's why I'm here tonight, to sit in this seat to say that. We want to make sure that you do continue to be able to have your home value. We will not let that happen. But some of the comments that I've heard about, from recordings to what was captured in newspapers, left me feeling some kind of way. I don't feel like your neighbor. I don't feel like a resident of Normal, even though I sit in this seat tonight. So let us be mindful sometimes to find ways to think about how we say things and how we perceive things. Because whether you know it or not, no matter what price point, if the lowest price point is $315, I'm not ashamed to say I could never afford it. Can't. Wouldn't even be able to live there. Not even on my best day. With my 3-job working self. Can't do it. So yes, it left me feeling some kind of way. I just want you to think about that as you continue on and as we'll work together to bring our community together and not continuously fall into NIMBY. And I don't know if many of you know about NIMBY, but NIMBY came behind redlining. And who did redlining impact? People who looked like me. That's all I'm going to say tonight.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. First thing I want to start off with is there was something in the press WGLT put out about these residents not wanting basketball hoops in the neighbors next door. Well, I live in Wintergreen, not Wintergreen 2, but Wintergreen 1. It was not our choice, and I'm sure it's the same with the folks in Wintergreen 2, that we could not have basketball hoops. In Wintergreen 2, or in Wintergreen 1, we have gone multiple times trying to get basketball hoops allowed. So for WGLT to put out that it's racist not to want to have basketball hoops, they need to take the finger off of these folks and the folks in Wintergreen 1. We did not decide that. That was the developer. So I just wanted to get that out there, because I think that was wrong that WGLT did that. Now, as far as, I know folks on all sides of this, okay, and I respect them all, okay, the developer, the builder, I know them. But what it comes to is this is a new development. This is not an extension of Wintergreen. This is not another phase of Wintergreen. This is a new development. The covenant that these folks were given, that was put on their property, it said one of the reasons it was to protect the owners of buildings and sites against such improper use of surrounding land as will depreciate the value of their property. This is what they had put on them. So, they bought into it realizing that the association would kind of protect their property values. We do have neighborhoods that are $1 million homes. So we can't say that we're going to have, expensive homes and, homes that are half as much in the same neighborhood. That just doesn't happen. Now, another thing in this covenant that they have, it says that if it actually identifies this development or this land that's going to be developed in this new development. And it says that if there's land that's going to be developed over there, the developer reserves the right to kind of include it in this whole thing, but they have to abide by the same covenants. So when these folks are saying, hey, are they going to abide by the same covenants? This is what they're going back to, is this is what our association told us we were going to do. So they're not being NIMBY. They're pulling out the contractual obligation that is on their property that they can't get around. So I just want people to realize that that's what they bought into. And there's, a map on here too. It just shows the land. It doesn't show the layout. But I'm sure everybody has seen what they were told it would be. This green map, it's been given around freely to a lot of people. So then I see why they're concerned. Then I look to the code, okay? What is the town supposed to be doing in a situation like this? So then in section 15.8, this describes what the planning commission is supposed to do, and it gives 5 flags. Several of these flags, they're just waving out there now. One of them is the commission and the staff, they're supposed to look to the extent to which the proposal minimizes any adverse impact of the development upon adjoining land. I think it's pretty obvious that we've heard these folks are saying there's an adverse impact because of this new development, not an extension of what's there on their adjoining land. So there's flag number 1. There's only 5 flags here. Another one is the extent to which the adequately improved streets connected to the improved arterial street system are available for this new development. Well, one of them, they're going right on the beach, which is that arterial connector street. The second one is they have to go clear through Wintergreen 2 to access it. They're going on 3 streets. Fitzer, Loblolly, Hixie, or 4, and the one that starts with the B, Bristlecone. So now they're going through 4. That is their thoroughfare we're giving them to get to this arterial street. That is what I see as a big issue. Well, one of the other flags was the extent to which the proposed development will favorably or adversely affect other persons and or property, and if so, whether because of circumstances particular to the location, the effect is likely to be a greater than ordinary associated with development of the type proposed. So yes, this is something that's going to be adversely impacting them. So out of these 5 points, there's 3 huge red flags. This should have been addressed at the Planning Commission. The staff should have looked at this because this is what staff are supposed to do. And now it's up here in our lap because, the neighbors are concerned. I see this as a thoroughfare. I don't think we can stop progress and say this property will never be developed. Developers go bankrupt all the time. So development stops, new developer comes in, they do their own thing or they extend it. That happens. The original developer is, well, it could change hands, but they are changing the development. It looks like here in the pictures that the roads are even narrower. They're not narrower, that's just the picture?
That is just the picture.
Okay. So, things are changing. And with that, I'm worried about what type of liability we have as a town that we missed all these flags and now we're building a thoroughfare through there. People do pay a premium to be on a cul-de-sac street. So for moving traffic may not be the greatest, but if you've got a family and kids, you don't want to be on that main thoroughfare where you've got kids or where there's cars driving through there all the time. And when you say that most of the cars are going to go to Beach Street, well, it depends on which way they're going. If they're trying to go east, they're probably going to keep going east and go through Wintergreen 2 to get to Towanda Avenue and then head east. If they're going west, then that's probably accurate that they're probably going to take Beach Street. We can't predict, or they're going to take they're going to go west and not through Wintergreen too. We can't predict where people are going to work and which way they're going to go, but this is a separate development. And they are entitled to their property values being protected. This isn't just the homes that are adjacent to it or adjacent to this new development. That traffic is going to go throughout all of Wintergreen too, except for down Fitzer where the cul-de-sac is. You know, so it extends well beyond there. You know, I've talked with the developer, and I think maybe the developer may have gotten some bad advice from staff when they first looked at this and said, yes, this probably wouldn't be a problem to go through Wintergreen 2. I wish that wouldn't have happened because the developers spent a whole lot of time on that assurance that that would be okay. And, you know, we've had developers come before us before. This is the first developer that I've seen go out of their way to talk with the residents and try and come up with a solution. So I really have to give the developer credit that they have done that and they're trying to work with people. I wish more people would be just willing to communicate with folks. But they haven't been able to get past what I think is the big elephant, which is they don't want this road to be a thoroughfare. You know, lots of folks move into that neighborhood and area simply because they want to go to Prairie Land Elementary. So we don't have folks that are coming in bringing their teenagers that know how to cross the street, look for cars. It's constantly new parents. They've got their young kids. Now they're worried about where do they want to go to school. They don't want to get redistricted, so they try and get as close to Prairie Land as possible. You know, my family did that. We put offers on every house that was there at the price we could afford because we couldn't afford to buy some of these other homes. And we were lucky enough to get there, you know, so that's why we're in Prairie Land. And, you know, I know that kids, they're not born to watch for cars. You know, a ball goes in the street, they go in the street. You know, I just hope that it doesn't come to the day, if this passes, that a child gets hit or, God forbid, killed because we were so worried about traffic flow rather than, you know, developments need to be self-contained and not use basically a less dense development as the thoroughfare to get to the higher density development. I mean, gosh, I would imagine in the comp plan, that's kind of inverted, that we say you should go through, or that your developments that are closer to the roads be higher density and the ones in the back be lower density. But here you're taking the higher density neighborhoods through the lower density neighborhood. You know, another piece that I know it concerns a lot of the residents out there as well is what does this mean for the lot on the other side of Wintergreen? You know, because there's plans and talk about that becoming apartment buildings. You know, so now the traffic study that we're not so worried about right now, that's where this is coming from. There is no four-way stop at Fitzer and Beach. There's lots of kids that go to Prairie Land. They walk there, you know, and they're in elementary school. They need a stop sign so cars don't fly through there. I would welcome any council member to go out there and sit someday in the morning and watch all the cars that fly down there. Once you pass Fitzer, it's a freeway until you get to Towanda Avenue. You know, and then going the other way, if you go to Beach Street and look at Beach
Mr. Nordry,
and Rab.
Wrap it up, please. You're
Okay.
way long over your 10 minutes.
If you look at Beach and Rab in the morning too, that is backed way up. So now we're going to add another 100 and some homes in a short amount of time.
Mr. Nord, if you have more, you can come back at your
Okay.
second bite.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Reese, please.
Just a couple of quick comments, I guess, in response to Mr. Nord's comments. I did want to point out that the Planning Commission did take into consideration, they have been reminded at each meeting what their purpose is and what their scope is. And I believe staff did an appropriate job in identifying the scope and the points that you've highlighted in terms of the role of the Planning Commission. Staff recommended, made a recommendation. We also pointed out that we believe this proposed development back in August, when it was presented to the Planning Commission, met code and met the intention of the code. And Planning Commission also recommended approval of the August plan. Since Planning Commission reviewed that, and since Planning Commission's action in August, the plan before you tonight is slightly modified with fewer lots. It has not gone back to Planning Commission, but it is coming directly to you. In regard to Bristlecone going through from Wintergreen 2 to what used to be Wintergreen 3, but now called Weldon Reserve, the concept of a cul-de-sac is just a recent discussion, very late in the game. And I'm going to refer back to packet page 710 and packet page 712. The original plan, when council approved this and annexed it back in 2001, showed Bristlecone going all the way through, serving that whole neighborhood. And it was all considered Wintergreen at the time. And the plan tonight also shows Bristlecone going all the way through. Staff, the town did not have any formal input on the what we're calling kind of the TIHAC plan, but even the TIHAC plan showed Bristlecone going through. So the discussion of a cul-de-sac on Bristlecone is new. And we do have code, municipal code in terms of the subdivision that identifies in an R1 neighborhood, basically, I believe 15 lots in terms of the lots on a cul-de-sac. So this would be a significant variance from the code, as Ms. Davison explained earlier. So I just wanted to share that.
Mr. Preston.
Thanks. First of all, thank you to the packed house that we have tonight. It is clear, I think, to all of us up here how personal, how passionate, and how engaging of an issue this is for each of you. Thank you to those who spoke. Thank you to those who were supporting and behind those who spoke. Whether it always seems this way or not, I mean, we are here to be your government and to be responsive to the people that we're here to serve. And thank you for being engaged and making those voices heard. I think they were heard loud and clear tonight, personal perspective. Also, thank you to the developers on this. To Mr. Nord's point earlier, it isn't often that we have developers who do engage with the neighborhood. That is not something that they are forced to do, and I'm glad that they did in this case, and made some adjustments from what came in August to when we were back here in September. So thank you to the developer for being proactive. I think in that sense, I think that's wise in a lot of respects, and I appreciate that. I want to pick up on a couple pieces, a couple themes that have been presented tonight in various forms, and I want to make sure that I have a full understanding of it from staff. I think first of all for a couple of these. So to a point that was made by Mr. Nord, it's something that I've questioned myself, and I'm glad it's coming up. This addition does seem distinctly different than the other phases of Wintergreen that have already been built. Can the town stipulate, I guess, what can the town stipulate in terms of neighborhood continuity, neighborhood name, HOA covenants being followed, all within a neighborhood development from one phase to the next?
Sure. So, and Brian can correct us if we're wrong, but the town really doesn't have any role to play in covenants. When a property is already annexed into the community, such as this property, they are merely subject to the code, to the zoning code and the subdivision code. Now, sometimes you might be thinking of subdivisions that come in under an annexation agreement where we can, in fact, negotiate all manner of things that are not in the zoning code or the subdivision code, including sometimes like house designs and things like that. That's not where we're at with this property. So what we applied was the zoning code and the subdivision code, neither of which allow us to get to anything like covenants. And as far as like the name of the subdivision goes, I mean, if they want to name it something different, we are fine with that as long as it doesn't duplicate another name somewhere. I don't know that we could or would want to force them to name it something in particular. So choosing Weldon Reserve is fine. So yeah, I don't know if that, was there a third question?
Well, I think that answer, I mean, I think the biggest part of that for me is, can we as the town in this situation, for this phase, mandate that they are following HOA covenants that already exist for previous phases? I guess. is the
No,
question.
we cannot.
Okay. All right. Second question. Can we stipulate renting versus owner occupied?
No,
So it could, I mean,
not per current code.
okay. And that wouldn't even be possible, I believe, for the existing homes in Wintergreen. If somebody wanted to rent one of those from a town standpoint, it may be
Yeah, it's-
against the
yeah,
covenants, but like
we just
from
don't
our
have a role in
standpoint,
that,
we
yeah.
don't.
Yeah, I mean,
Across the board,
people
that's
rent
not
houses. Every now and again, we'll get that question, but people rent houses all over the community, and we don't necessarily know when it's happening, but it's not in our zoning code.
This TIHEC plan I find kind of frustrating because it seems like there are a lot of people who made big investments and big plans for their family based on something that was presented to them and thinking that that was the formal town plan. And it was not, it's not something that was filed with the town, has never been formally part of that neighborhood plan,
That is
as
correct.
far as the town is
Yeah.
concerned.
First time we saw it was recently, at least me, so.
That is not our problem, it seems like, but that is a problem, and I hope that that is not continuing to be dispersed moving forward if it doesn't accurately reflect the neighborhood plan as it's been, because that I think that's a big deal. All right, two more. Stormwater, it was touched on to some extent. Mr. Trumbull, you had mentioned it. Talk to us about the process with stormwater runoff and between here and final plats. I mean, if the stormwater plan has to meet engineering standards, if it doesn't, I mean, is there a scenario where it doesn't and this phase would be required to have a detention basin in amongst themselves, hypothetically?
Well,
if it
hypothetically, yes, that's possible. Now, I will say, again, the engineer involved in this proposed development was also the engineer of record for Wintergreen. So he has a good history and a good understanding of what the drainage dynamics are supposed to be for the property. And again, as I mentioned, that's the first part of the conversation we had, from both sides essentially, is this basin going to carry this ground? And the developer wanted the same assurance. Because again, if it didn't, then it would force the need to have detention in the undeveloped 26 or 7 acres, which ultimately would probably potentially consume lots. Okay, so that was a big part of their decision in moving forward. So as far as from this point forward, say hypothetically this plan is approved, then the burden shifts back to the developer's engineer to do a full-blown set of stormwater calculations. And I think they've done probably 2/3 or 3/4 of that work just to make sure they're on the right track. But again, as part of the infrastructure build out of any subdivision, the streets, the public sewer, the public water, construction plans, just like we have construction plans to build a home, you have construction plans to build the infrastructure. Those get submitted to the engineering department. Couple sets go to IDOT, to DNR, to IEPA, for their different reviews to validate, are these accurate plans? Is the sewer and water being constructed accordingly with right materials and all kinds of engineering standards? Same thing goes for the drainage. And so again, it's the burden of the engineer to produce all that information, and then the town's role, and the engineering in particular, is that they review those calculations to make sure they understand and agree that they meet our standards to press forward. And only after the construction plans are approved and then the infrastructure gets built, Ms. Smith asked the question, are these things looked at during construction? Yes, engineering and water will look at infrastructure as it's being built, in the ground. And then once it's turned over, streets are built and accepted, opened to the public, where we start writing building permits. And then we, of course, take it from there on the home construction. So a couple different spots where in this, very specifically to this development, there was a lot of investigation on the basin and the drainage. And I think Ms. Reese may have mentioned in her opening remarks too about the water is flowing from the west to the east, and it's going that direction. That's how the topography lays. There is a flood route involved in the north end of this subdivision. That might have created some confusion on the preliminary plan about seeing the dark arrows and, is this one-way traffic? No, those are flood routes and which way the water's going to flow. And if you look at those, basically you can see that the water is flowing from the west to the east. But again, not to belabor the point on the cul-de-sac, but if a cul-de-sac was introduced, anything's possible, but it would certainly complicate the drainage design plan for the property.
And I'll just add two things, that as part of a preliminary subdivision plan, they do a pretty good analysis of utilities. So they're not just taking a stab in the dark that like they hope this stuff works out when they come to the final platting time. A lot of work goes in, which is why they have to do so much engineering in a preliminary subdivision plan. So this neighborhood was always designed to go to the east. And in fact, Wintergreen 2 does drain to that detention basin right now. So it's already partly working. So that was always the plan. And that is how we foresee it building up.
And actually, Wintergreen 3 actually had a full-blown set of construction drawings prepared, like in 2015 or 16, that were approved by the town to build out the addition that just never came to be. The developer, again, for economic reasons and the economy and demand, things somewhat stalled, and so they sat on them and didn't press forward. But there was an actual approved set of construction drawings for Wintergreen Phase 3. It just never got executed for market reasons.
Okay. Final piece, and it's a big one, is traffic. So a traffic study was done in 2001. Was that undertaken by the town or the developer at that time?
I cannot say for sure. It's almost always the developer. So
Correct.
That's pretty certainly what happened.
Okay. And are there cases where the town mandates traffic studies for phases within a subdivision compared to a new subdivision from the start?
It's never happened since I've been here. So
No, I've not seen it happen either. And again, unless there's a very, very substantial change and it was a large piece of property, and there was a substantial change in the use of the property. So not very likely in residential. On occasion, maybe in larger multiple family or maybe even commercial properties as things change. But
Yeah,
again,
based upon the proposed use
Yeah.
of the land. But I agree
Yeah.
with the comments
I think-
made in terms of residential. Basically, the traffic study would have occurred upon annexation and approval of, before we brought it to council, of the original preliminary plan for the whole area.
And I think the 2001 study was, understand it was coupled probably with the idea that Unify was going to build Prairie Land School in that neighborhood. We were going to introduce a fire station. We anticipated there was Kelly Glen growth on the other side of Rab Road. So looking at crystal ball type stuff, look at what's going on in that area. That's what warrants bigger traffic studies, not just very specific to a no offense to like a 280 lot residential subdivision.
And so if I'm looking at this 2001 original plan, to the east of where we're talking, the Loblolly, Pixie, that whole area, the original 2001 plan, when the traffic study was done, technically had two different ways from the proposed phase we're talking about tonight to ultimately get to Beach Street, via Bristlecone and via White Pine to Hicksey, to Fitzer. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Because then Fitzer became the cul-de-sac, so hence we're only talking about the one now, via Hicksey with this. Okay. Those are all my questions for now.
Ms. Smith?
Not any more questions, but some thoughts. I understand a concern about decreasing property values, especially given the wording of the homeowner's document that many of you live under. what I want to share is my thoughts that beyond the fact that we need more housing yesterday, and I shared this in conversations with three of the residents that I've spoken to. When Rivian was incentivized to take over the Mitsubishi plant, we thought we were setting a high bar to commit them to 1,000 jobs before they would get any compensation. They're over 3,500 now. They are a big stone that had been tossed in a pool that has ripple effects that we're just beginning to experience. If you've been following the council, time and again in this year, we have had developers go into their storage and dust off their plans and come back to us and say, hey, we've got people that'll buy from us now. If you read the building permits in the Sunday Panagraph, time and again, Normal has some of those projects getting started. You've got new homes at various lots, and I've been watching because I'm competitive, and we tend to have more than our neighbor to the south. So we're consistently having people attracted to our community. Wildwood, that had been on the doors of bankruptcy, was snatched in the 11th hour of its TIF deadline and revitalized and is now looking to expand. This is going to create even more pressure for homes. And I think if we're going to have anything, we're going to have people complaining that their property taxes are going up because the values are going up because there's not enough housing. I want people buying homes in Normal where we promote infill, where we incentivize people to stay close in so they're not commuting from bedroom communities and damaging our climate. I want them to be a part of our community and spread the cost so that we have more people supporting us. I fully expect that our town could grow by 50% in the next 10 to 20 years. And we've got zoning that puts residences in specific areas. We aren't a city like Houston that doesn't believe in zoning, and they've got flooding as a result of that. We're not a city like Boulder that says you can't build out in the developed areas surrounding the city, so they've got a finite amount of housing, and it's going up and up and up in cost, and people can't afford to live there. This is thoughtful infill housing. It's at a price point that some of these people coming in, and in my conversation with one of the partners, the conversation was he's got the money to build on spec. He wants to go ahead and build. And as those units become available, he can pivot from either a purchase agreement or a lease contract. But there is nothing in stone that says it is going to be a complex like the student housing that recently sold finally, and that's going to be revitalized. I'm just asking you to understand that these are going to be individuals that will bring as much to the community as you have, and recognize that there is abundance. And I believe in a God of abundance, and I think there's plenty for all of us to share if we open our doors and welcome our neighbors.
Mr. Nord.
Question for staff. Why can't they have two entrances on Beach?
What do you mean?
Why can't this development have two entrances on Beach.
Oh, you mean just the area to be developed if Bristlecone had a
If
cul-de-sac?
Bristlecone had a cul-de-sac,
Sure.
why couldn't they enter on, why couldn't they have 2 points of ingress and egress on Beach?
Sure, so I mean, setting aside the issue that we've kind of stated our issues with the cul-de-sac itself on like Fitzer, Hicksey, so set that aside. It could be redesigned to have 2 entrances. It would result in several lots having to go because you'd have a whole new street in there, and around the cul-de-sac you'd lose some lots. But surely, I mean, it could be redesigned. It would be a whole new process. It would have to go back through
Right.
the process.
If I could jump in and
Sure.
supplement that, if, in order to have, the only reason to have 2 ingress and egress areas onto Beach Street from the proposed Weldon
Reserve.
Would be if Bristlecone dead-ended. And in order for that to happen, council would have to reject this plan. Developer would have to go back to square one to redevelop Weldon Reserve. And in that process, not only just the road network, but also stormwater network, as we heard earlier, or stormwater infrastructure. But that also would result in the loss of some currently platted lots of Wintergreen 2. And I don't know what the current state is of those platted lots. I don't know if they're sold or not. I have no idea. But that's what would be entailed, because Wintergreen 2 has some platted lots there along Beach Street. So can it be done? Absolutely. It just would require redesign.
Okay, good. So then it can be done. Those lots, it's my understanding that the same developer owns those lots.
That's
So,
possible. I don't know who the
If that's
owner
the case, or if not, the developer that he's buying them off of may still be the owner, and they can work out something with that to make it happen.
Mr. Nord, if I could also jump in, I believe, and it may be relevant to information, but it's my understanding that if there were 2 access points from Beach into Weldon Reserve and a dead end or a cul-de-sac on Bristlecone, there would be a minimum of 8 lots that would be lost, which would
Well,
be
the
significant.
developer would have to worry about that, but then I don't think
Correct,
the developer's got
correct.
to worry about building the bigger lots to match the other neighborhood, because it's truly its own subdivision that he can do kind of what he wants
Right. I
there.
was
So
simply
actually,
sharing
he
in
may
case
be
that
able
was
to
relevant.
gain more lots and, not have to worry about this adjoining neighborhood who's, going to be adversely affected, which again are these red flags that are in the code and in their covenants. So that's possible. I was looking while other folks were talking, just at other dead-end streets, just to see how many different parcels were on there, some of the longer ones. So Beechwood, that's got like 40 some there that are there. So that's quite a few. There's Pine Meadows, which is not very far away, just a few blocks to the south, that has got quite a few.
Right.
And then Burton has got about 24, which is over by Hershey and Fort Jesse-ish area. And this one's that similar number of homes to have a cul-de-sac on. Now, I understand that if this was a brand new development coming in, then yes, we don't want to have these long cul-de-sacs. I can understand that. But we're past that point. This was built, started 20 years ago is when this project started. So we're past all that now. If ever there was a time for an exception now, this seems to be that time for an exception to basically address all the issues. The developer still gets to build. Everybody wins in this. And as far as this being the only place in town for us to develop because of this housing shortage, we can go to the center of town, walk, 5 miles and you're out of town. Walk a mile any direction. You're going to find vacant lots that have not been developed yet. So this isn't the only spot in town to build. And as we know, we've seen other developers come. They're trying to build projects too. So I don't think we have to take down the property values and adversely affect all these neighbors just because there's a housing shortage in Bloomington Normal. There's also the labor shortage too, you know. But anyway, I would be willing to support this if it came back without using the loblolly, Hicksy, Fitzer, and Bristlecone as a thoroughfare to get to another development. If this developer wants to build it and have it as the exact same covenants as what they're signed into, you know, fine, that's extending the existing development. But if it's going to be a new development, then, you know, keep it self-contained. And I know you had mentioned in the write-up you wanted accessibility for like bike and pedestrian traffic. I know these neighbors probably would not care if there was a sidewalk connecting, because there's going to be kids over in the other neighborhood that want to come over and play with the other kids, you know, and then just to get back and forth from school, that's going to work. It would be very consistent with what's in Wintergreen too. There's sidewalks and stuff connecting to lots of different places. So that would be my request. Is it's not no, but not at this time, using their neighborhood as a thoroughfare. Thank you.
Ms. Lorenz.
Thank you. I think we've worn out the Boy Scouts. They left. A few other people have left. But for those of you who are still here, extra credit. I'm glad that we're here, and this is important. Not to minimize it in any way. I know the author of this document that was shared with us. I know she had to leave, it looks like, with her son, so please let her know that we appreciate that. I appreciate it. You know, that to me, and maybe in somewhat of an attempt to at least wrap this up in my head, at some point I know we'll need to come to a vote. This is a bit of a head and a heart issue, my head and my heart, okay? And my head tells me that, you know, we've heard some expert information here from Ms. Davison and Mr. Trommel, two of our more seasoned staff members, experts in their field. I really have appreciated you guys sitting in the hot seats here tonight and providing answers to some very technical questions. My head also tells me, as I look at the municipal code of what the Planning Commission is meant to do and the flags that you were referring to, my colleague here was referring to, that we actually are pretty consistent with those tests, if you will. There's 6 of them altogether. Suitability of the subject property according to existing zoning, residential. Length of time property has remained vacant. It's been vacant. It's been vacant so long that the annexation agreement expired. Suitability of the subject property for uses authorized for the proposed zoning. We are hearing that traffic studies, that stormwater management was all done with the anticipation that that piece of land would eventually have structures on it. Existing zoning of nearby property. R1, we talk about the precedent set with R1B and R2 coexisting. In my own neighborhood of Ironwood, we have short streets, probably cul-de-sacs, that have some duplexes on them. We all coexist pretty amicably. I don't even really realize that, you know, what is a duplex and what is you know, single family property as you just go past the curb. You know, and then 6 here was relative hardship or gain to the public compared with that of the owner resulting from the outcome of the zoning amendment. That gets at the issue of value. And again, I'm going to go on my 28 years here of living in a pretty nice neighborhood that has withstood the test of time. And I think it has withstood the test of time. My property tax assessment would have proved this because it just went up this year. It has withstood the test of time, I think, because we have a really good community. And we have a really good community because we have really good planner and inspections department. We have really good engineering firms, and we've been blessed with some really good developers and builders over the years. And so as growth fires back up again in our community, like Ms. Smith was just saying, people want to live here. And yes, we are outpacing the the competition, if you will, in terms of development. So that's great news. And the other thing I think about too, with respect to my home and many of your homes, is location, location, location. No one will take your house and therefore the value of that location away, because you will always be near a trail. You will always be nearby a nice golf course. You will always have nice access to the interstate. You will always be in a nicely laid out, planned neighborhood. I mean, our neighborhoods in this community, because of good planning, have withstood the test of time. Not just Ironwood, not just Wintergreen, but so many neighborhoods have really, really matured well. And so change is hard, and I know that immediately, and this is where my head now begins to go to my heart, I know that immediately we begin to feel the worst case scenario. And I experienced this too, and in fact, talking to many of the neighbors, I found myself going down memory lane, if there is such one in town. And that memory lane was my 28 years of raising my kids. They're now 25 and 27. And in the beginning, I didn't let them go past the stop sign to get even a look at Towanda Avenue. And then somewhere, I think around the 2000s, Heather Ridge and a whole bunch of homes went up north of us, off of Northtown. I'm pointing at Miss Reese. She knows where that is. And suddenly, Towanda became a cut-through. I didn't feel real good about it, but I didn't have a say-so in the matter, because there was land, and there was a land seller, and a land buyer, and a need for homes, and a need for people to buy those homes. And so I had to start to talk to my kids about busy streets. And luckily, they started to get older, and they started to realize the importance of looking left and right and left again. And they even had to cross Towanda to even get on to the bus to take them to Prairie Land. And then, of course, all the cool kids didn't live in my cul-de-sac. They had to go down to Ironwood. So now they had to ride their bike down Towanda and negotiate that crazy intersection at Towanda and Ironwood Drive so they could play with their friends on Ironwood. And again, I just told them to stay in groups, look out for each other, and don't play in the streets. And then they decided they wanted to go play at Ironwood Park. Oh, and we're going to go to Casey's, Mom. Can I have some money? Well, now I'm really worried. But they went, and I told them to stay in groups and look both ways. And they made it. And then all of a sudden, they became 16 years old, and now they were driving. And guess what? They were the danger on Towanda Avenue. And now suddenly I had to look at them and say, from a driver's point of view, be careful on Towanda. And if you don't slow down, and if your friends don't slow down, I'm calling Normal Police. I'm going to ask them to sit out there and give you a ticket. So my heart goes out to you because I experienced some of these things. Our kids grew up. They figured it out. And quite honestly, I think they coped a whole lot better than I did. And they're 25 and they're 27. And yes, I still ask them to text me when they get home from a long trip, because that's what worrisome moms do, and dads. So I appreciate where you guys are coming from, and I appreciate your sleepless nights and your concern. But I believe your value of your home, all of our homes, have withstood the test of time. And I believe you are caring parents that will always want to know where your kids are and encourage them to be careful, to look left and right and left again, and to stay in groups. And when they become 16, you threaten them to call the Normal Police and to have them give them a ticket when they're going too fast. Things change, neighborhoods change,
And as long as we are planning right, working with decent and talented developers, our community and the neighborhoods, which are communities within our community, will continue to hold their value. And I guess the last point I want to make is about the school. And we don't have anybody here from Prairie Land or Unit 5, but again, just a mom that's lived here 28 years. Redistricting is messy, and if you want to talk about an emotional topic, that one is. And it is in the district's best interest to keep your neighborhood going to Prairie Land. Why? They don't want to add your neighborhood to a bus route. They want to minimize big neighborhoods getting bused somewhere else. So I think you've got, nothing is, I don't have a crystal ball, but if I were living in Wintergreen, chances are very, very strong you will stay going to Prairie Land. And just wait till they go to West, and they're that new driver, and they have a friend that lives in Carlock. And your daughter says, I want to go to Carlock at 9 o'clock at night. And you're thinking about all the dark county roads that she's going to go on. It doesn't get any easier. But I hope that you can maybe take a breath, realize that your kids are resilient, and keep loving on them. Thanks.
Ms. Reese.
Thank you. Just a couple of final comments, kind of tying in with Ms. Lorenz's comments, but I'm like you, I'm a Prairie Land parent as well. Prairie Land's a great school. I just want to share with council and the audience that it is certainly never staff's intention to make citizens feel like they haven't been heard. Our job is to hear, but it's also to interpret the code and make a recommendation to council. As such, that's how we've ended up here tonight. So certainly appreciate all the residents' many emails and their conversation at the Planning Commission, which was a very long meeting. A lot of people attended, and I do appreciate that, and certainly appreciate the conversation this evening. Prior to council convening the meeting this evening, the developer had indicated that they were present and would be available. I don't see any purpose for the developer to come forward, and had indicated that I thought everything had been addressed well in advance, but I did want to make council aware of that. So, thank you.
I'm not going to be redundant. A lot's been said tonight. We've been at this one item quite a long time, and I frankly, I think it's been a good conversation. I want to emphasize a point that's kind of been a theme and touched on a few times. One is just as we can't predict traffic patterns through a neighborhood, we can't predict property values. Talk to people in the town of Normal today. They're pretty happy about the property values. 2008, probably not so much. Next year, I have no idea. We don't have that crystal ball. But as a trend in our community, certainly over the last few years or over the last 10 to 30 years, property values have gone up. Year to year, that value fluctuates, certainly, and we can't promise anything to anybody about what that's going to do. But as a trend, generally, with the development and the progress in the town of Normal, it's been a good investment. So I hope that provides some solace. I guess just as a wrap up, I'd like to appreciate everybody involved coming and putting yourself out and talking, and staff, developer for their efforts, citizens for coming and sharing, whether that's been emails or phone calls or your conversation today. In my view, this means that the system's working. Certainly, a developer holding meetings to hear from existing neighborhoods is not common in what I've seen in the council in over 10 years. But as development progresses in infill projects throughout the town, wherever they are, And certainly in this area, however this goes this evening, I hope the conversations continue. It's apparent that obviously some people are not happy with the changes and want further changes. But some changes have been made and seem to address some things. And in my book, that's progress. And it seemed to follow a fairly civil path, which in today's age I always appreciate with such opposition. I'll leave it at that in our communities and our political process. So I greatly appreciate everybody for their civil engagement and the process. Please call the roll.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
No.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye. Proposal passes. Moving on to the next item.
Mayor, if I could interrupt you on this particular next item, council has at their spot a modified resolution to go with the preliminary plan. It just simply references the new subdivision name of Weldon Reserve versus the one originally in the packet indicated as Wintergreen Phase 3. So I wanted to make the clarification. The online version of the packet does contain the updated resolution.
The next item is a resolution approving a preliminary subdivision plan for Weldon Reserve subdivision, north and east of Beach Street and Chuck Murray Drive.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. We've only just approved having the more dense zoning. A couple things that I think were missed in the last conversation was it wasn't just about their property values. They had legitimate safety concerns for their kids. Ms. Lorenz, you talked about your child. You live on a cul-de-sac. When your child was out, she had to go several houses down before she even got to a busy street. So, these folks are not going to have that ability anymore. They will literally be on that busy street, which is very different than even just being 2 houses in from there. Now, we talked about how the staff and the council listened. Well, at the planning commission meeting, even the planning commissioner said that their job, or that they were not required to listen to the public's input. And the town attorney agreed with them. I played that recording before. We can play it again. So whenever we say that they're being heard, they've been told that they weren't being heard. It wasn't their job, or it wasn't our job to listen to them, We represent people of Normal. We don't represent folks that don't live here. Developers can come in, build whatever it is, I like this development group, but I don't know if any of them actually live in town. We represent the other folks. That's the hat we wear. I can be great friends with them and things, but when it comes to our time up here, that's who we represent. We talk about how we need to be better listeners and that we want our youth to want to come back here. Well, unfortunately, what I think we've done is these are residents that live here every day of the year. It's not like students that are here for 9 months and then they go home, or they're only here for 4 years and then they leave off to a job somewhere else. These are people that have chosen to make their lives here and to raise their children here. We want their children to want to come back. I fear if we allow this connection or this loblolly thoroughfare, that now these kids are going to be raised and their parents are going to be griping and saying, hey, kids, don't go out there. Even though we know you could last year, you can't go out there anymore because the town didn't listen to us. They're going to grow up thinking that Normal doesn't listen to their residents. We had this happen with Blackstone Trail when all those neighbors didn't want something, and yet we did it anyway. I wasn't on the council then, so I guess you did it anyway. And it's just sad that we get folks coming in wanting something for their community that they pay taxes in, and we just ignore them. You know, who is it that they hold accountable for this? Who is it that's supposed to fight for their neighborhood? You know, there's not one person up here that's responsible for their neighborhood or anybody else's neighborhood. So now they're looking around, who do we hold accountable? And that is a shame.
Mr. Nord, please confine your comments to the actual proposal on the table,
Okay,
not
so
representation.
Because.
Thank you.
All right, so then I would like their children to want to come back here and raise their kids here. That's why I came back, is because I wanted to raise my kids here. I would like them to do the same thing. And we can still vote no and ask the developer to come back to the table with 2 access points on Beach Street. It doesn't sound like it's that much to ask. They may get some additional lots by not having to give up the street there on Bristlecone. And again, this isn't our fault that the original developer decided to not extend his development. That is not our problem. Thank you.
Ms. Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I kind of want to pull this back a little bit. I don't know how we always end up getting off track on some things. So we're getting ready to take a look at the preliminary subdivision plan itself and have some conversation. And I want to stick to that. I don't want to get into politics and politicking or campaigning from the dais tonight. What I do want to try to make sure that, or at least get my brain around, is as we're going back to a question I asked in our kind of our general conversation, is the ideal of changes possibly being made to the preliminary plan if necessary, whether it be to address if as we move forward there may be, I understand water drainage now is fine, but say as we go through the process or as they take a further look before they get to the final plat, there's something that needs to be changed. It can also be done with the final plat. Am I correct?
Yes, if there were some sort of minor change that had to be made, if a lot had to be wider or narrower, it could, you know, again, if it's really minor, they wouldn't have to amend the preliminary plan. It would just be reflected on the final plat that comes to you.
Okay. Thank you for that. The other thing that seems to populate, which probably may not be addressed necessarily through preliminary plan, because that may be something we wouldn't find out until, based off of your comments, which is the traffic. There are, and this might be more towards you, Ms. Reese, or other staff. I know that there are other ways in which we can evaluate. How can I put this? Because I know it's been done over in my area where we evaluate the traffic flows or speed limits and things of that nature. That can be done once it's actually up to, just to make sure that the safety is intact. Am I correct?
Sure, there's different tools we have where we can monitor traffic and the like. Police department has a speed trailer. We can do traffic counts and such.
Okay. To me, those seem to be the two biggest things that have been some of the angst, and I just want to make sure that we take a look, because this is the proper time to have that conversation since we're talking about the preliminary plan. And I don't want everyone who's here thinking that there's, not other options as we move forward in ways to make sure that their safety, the water issues are addressed. I think when we get to some of the other things, you're getting into murky water. And what I mean by that is to say that because these homes are being built, it's going to tank your values. I think we get into murky waters when we say our schools won't be considered top notch anymore, because in our eyes it's gonna, I believe, or be over saturated. I believe Unit 5 will do what's necessary to make sure. A part of that also is having enough teachers, and that's something I know that they're struggling with. So it's not just how many people are coming there, it's also how many educators that are available to the classrooms. So it's a lot of things. I don't want to, when it's a safety issue, I get it. I want to make sure that we can address those things. The water issue, as long as we're doing that, that's important. And I've been doing as much research as I can. I have not seen where that this should tank your values. It's not like, and there are actually mixed market places, not in Illinois, but I visit them in both Arkansas and in North Carolina. And you can't tell what people pay from home to home. And that's because they've been diligent on how they've maintained that. And so that is something that I feel like we should, yes, continue to have a pride in our community. Absolutely. And I think if we do that and we continue to make that a priority, that shouldn't be a pain for you. Again, also at that price point, nobody's spending $300,000 and $400,000 to tear up a home or community. When you're paying that much, most people who make that much have bigger positions than me, and I don't think they're tearing up communities. That's just not what's in their mindset to do. So I think that's why some of this can come off kind of NIMBY. Okay. Next, I will also like to commend at least the coming together. I know it hasn't all been perfect. I hope you continue to communicate until the final plat, because again, this is just one of the steps. There's still the final plat process, in order to make sure that we have an addition to our community that is mutually beneficial to all. We know we need homes here. Again, this is not servicing low income, but it is servicing those who are looking for homes, who might be a professor or someone who might be a doctor. And even, I know you frown upon rentals or the sounding of it because there's misconceptions at that price point. Believe you me, not everybody, they're not me. But there are traveling doctors. I know one who's actually out of Chicago and is here at 6 to 8 weeks and sometimes more at a time. But right now, their only option is to go to the Hyatt. I don't know where we are in this building, the Hyatt. And I'm quite sure they probably would prefer, and it would be technically cheaper for them to rent a place that is a little bit more stable than to every 6 weeks come here and stay at a hotel and then be here for 6 to 8 weeks and then go back to Chicago. So that is what this is for. This is what the type of housing that is going to be there. And I want us to think from that perspective and be open. Not everything is going to be perfect. Some things we're going to have to compromise on, but know that we are hearing you. Again, safety and, the water and things like that. We'll make sure that those things are intact and that you can continue to raise your families and feel welcome here.
Before going on, I'm just going to ask my council folks, we had a wide latitude of the conversation on the last topic and a lot of opinions and feelings, and technical things were expressed. The item before us is a conversation about a preliminary subdivision plan. And unless there's something new, I'd ask us to confine our comments to the preliminary subdivision plan specifically, since we gave you such a wide latitude in the conversation to express a lot of opinions at that time. Thanks. Mr. Preston.
Thanks. So it seems to me, and maybe it's just me, but the issue overarching, from a practical sense, that is left in question is the traffic with, the traffic with Loblolly into Bristlecone, and there's been conversation about turning Bristlecone into a cul-de-sac in the existing Wintergreen 2. I understand how a cul-de-sac itself can be a bigger undertaking. Is there a reason why we couldn't just recommend that Bristlecone be dead-ended and, curb it so it's finished out, but keep it like it is, and then on the addition side, just loop that Bristlecone right down? Without taking the expense of a cul-de-sac for a cul-de-sac, why not just dead end it like it's been for the last decade anyway?
I think if Mr. Otto were here, he'd have strong opinions about not building a cul-de-sac. It definitely is in the manual of practice. Jason, you can scream from back there if you disagree, but it's really important for public service vehicles to have a cul-de-sac to fully turn around and maneuver. Not just in an emergency, a fire truck, of course, but we're talking a public street that's going to have garbage picked up routinely, bulky waste, snow plows. You just can't have those trucks. They'd have to actually either back into someone's driveway to turn around, which nobody wants that, or they'd be pretty much backing down, if I'm envisioning this correctly, they'd be backing down Bristlecone, Loblolly, Hicksey, all the way down to Beach. You gotta have a place for people to turn around, the big trucks.
We've had homes on Loblolly for how many years?
It is you are completely right that it can be done in a short term, but I think in the long term, that's why we have cul-de-sacs as the permanent build out and not a true dead end. But yeah, clearly trucks are doing their job now. It's just far from ideal.
I guess the only other thing I'd offer too, in all these discussions we've had, although we've not been party to the private developer homeowners, I don't think the expectation was the cul-de-sac would be built on existing Wintergreen 2 property. In fact, I'm not sure that'd even be possible without
it would have to
demolition of a home and acquisition of a couple of other platted lots. I think the expectation was this was going to occur on the undeveloped portion to the west.
So then, help me understand.
Which would result in a lot loss of 6 to 8.
Road there?
I'm sorry.
The north-south road that
Is Loblolly?
No, in the new edition. The easternmost in the new edition.
I can't read that.
There's a red squiggly line
Okay.
that's blocking out the street name. Austrian, is that right?
That could be
Sounds
so
close enough.
tiny. I can't read
so
it.
then what would...
No, I think ultimately introducing a cul-de-sac
So it'd be a totally different design in that.
that would force the redesign of the undeveloped portion of the
Right,
the 26
resulting
acres.
in lost lots of, in Weldon Reserve or Wintergreen 3, lost lots, and then would require redesign so that there would be 2 access points then on Beach for Weldon Reserve. So constructing a dead end, a permanent dead end on Loblolly triggers additional redesign, if that makes sense. So it would require redesign of stormwater because Bristlecone is the flood route, and it would require an additional ingress and egress onto Beach Street for the 108 lots of Weldon, 100-ish lots because they would lose some. Of Weldon Reserve. So can Bristlecone or Loblolly, well, not Loblolly, can Bristlecone be dead-ended and cul-de-sac somehow? Absolutely, but it would be a redesign of Weldon Reserve then.
And a pretty substantial waiver to the cul-de-sac
Correct.
number of lots.
Mhm.
Ms. Lorenz.
We lost a lot of our crowd, and here we're talking about the part that they wanted to hear about, and that's bristlecone. Because now we're on the subdivision. Anything is possible, right? You know, from an engineering mindset, it's just time and money. So I've thought about this. I thought about the very thought you had, Mr. Preston. And then it was floodplain. And then it's the redesign of basically, you know, starting with a new piece of paper and starting to draw the lines again. Back to the point that Ms. Smith made, we need the houses yesterday. So, you know, like in any engineering problem, it's trade-offs, you know? And so so I thought about it from an engineering point of view, and then I thought, and I kept coming back to the public safety piece of it. And, you know, and also public works. And so, true story, the other day, Friday, apparently it's garbage pickup day at Trails at Sunset Lake, because I decided to follow a garbage truck in there to see what he or she would do. And it's not easy, because because of the way that's only partially built out. My hat's off to the driver. They did really well with that big old truck. But there's a lot of dead-end streets that they somehow, I don't know, swing around a three-point turn and got themselves out of there. So it's not ideal. I think about response time for a big fire truck to get down there. I'm always haunted by the experience that a friend had in my neighborhood, about 500 block of West Ironwood Drive. Her house burned to the ground. No fault of the fire response time, but I'm sure it was no picnic getting that big rig back there all the way around, halfway around Ironwood Drive. So, you know, things like that matter. And again, this is going to sound more head than heart. Let's not forget that the streets are public, and that the property that we buy and whatever we build on it is ours. And then there's this tiny little buffer called right-of-way that sometimes we argue about. But once we get through the right-of-way, it's public streets. And so as I talked with one neighbor at length last week, I said, you know, you could always have a private road. There are some places that have done that. Oh, I know, city planner gives me a funny look right now. But I mean, that's always an option. But watch what you wish for. Because now it's your pothole and your garbage and your snow to clean up. So when we start talking about streets, as much as we want to say it's my street, where I live, it's really the public street. And we've got to give that some weight and do it in the safest manner, back to all of the things on the Planning Commission, non-adverse, consistent with zoning. And so to a point made earlier about representation, I think we are representing the people, because we're representing not only, well, we're representing what we as government should represent, and that's the public portion of this community. And lost in this discussion has been that in our free market society, where we want property rights, who are we to say what seller can do and what buyer can do and what they can do with it, as long as it meets our expert planning guidelines, which I spoke about earlier, and as long as we're dealing with decent and qualified builders? Who are we? Now we're starting to infringe on property rights. So let's peel it back on the subdivision plan with the road design. We're talking about the public portion. And we've got to think about public works and first responders. And so as much as I'd love to see that as a cul-de-sac so they can play their kickball or have their, neighborhood picnics in the middle of the street, it's not practical. And in the interest of public safety, which is what we are representing here, not representing an individual person's rights for their property. I'm representing the whole town. We've got to think about all those things. So as much as I'd love to have it be a cul-de-sac, I don't think it's in the best interest of our community.
Mr. Nord, if you have something new to add, I'd ask you again, as I'm asking everybody, not to rehash what we've already said, please.
Sure. There was a commitment that Ms. Harris had put out there that the town would ensure that the residents would be safe along this thoroughfare. Shortly after I moved into the neighborhood, I called the town to complain about people speeding down the road that I lived on. And I was told that there was nothing the town could do. They couldn't put out a speed bump, they couldn't do anything.
Mr.
So
Nord,
I'm interested.
what's happening on a speeding on your street has nothing to do with a resolution to approve a preliminary subdivision plan.
So then my question is, if there are complaints because of the additional traffic and problems, what is it that the town is going to do to address the safety concern?
Again, Mr. Nord, that has
That's the
nothing to
heart
do
of the
with
issue.
this.
I would like to know what it is that the town can do if there's a safety concern, because that's the big concern that's been brought up.
If you genuinely have that question, that's a conversation for staff, but tonight we're talking about a preliminary subdivision plan?
This is for the residents. They're the ones that brought up the safety concern. The answer is not for me. I don't live in that neighborhood.
Mr. Nord, you're the one that's bringing up this subject right now in the form of that question.
Okay.
But if you have that question and you genuinely don't know the answer to that question already, then I'm suggesting that's a offline comment, not pertinent to the subject matter of the proposal.
Well, I disagree.
And then you have that conversation with staff and any residents who are confused about that.
All right, I disagree, because as an elected representative,
Mr. Nord, I'm
my
not going
job
to
is
go point to point
wear
back and forth
that
with
hat.
you. I'm not going to go point
Then
to
I
point with
appeal
you.
the decision of the chair.
If-
I'd like to take a vote. I'd like the council to vote on it. Can I ask that question?
Mr. Nord has moved to appeal the decision of the chair, so it's a majority vote.
Yep.
Can we clarify what a
I don't even know
yes
what we're being
versus a
asked.
no signifies?
As I understand it, I'm asking him to keep his comments to the proposal at hand. He wants to know an open-ended question about how the town is going to. Mr. Nord, correct me if I'm not paraphrasing well, but he wants to know an open-ended question about what the town will do about speeding safety on streets.
Can I phrase that better?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Please do.
I would like to know what the options are that the town will use if the residents if they experience a safety issue because of this increased traffic. So what are the options that they can look forward to? If
Easy
there's
answer. You call the police. Hello, that's what I threatened to do to my kids. They set up a little thing that says how fast you're going. They do that for a while. Then they sit there for a little while.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Day. We have a
Says that
we have
a motion on the floor to
yeah.
appeal the
Now that
ruling
there's a
of the
motion,
chair.
yeah.
So the motion is whether to appeal the ruling of the chair. In this case, because it's on a speaking objection, there's no discussion on the motion. It's going to be just a straight to a vote. A yes vote will overrule the chair. A no vote will sustain the decision of the chair.
And we don't need a second or just to call the roll, please.
Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
No.
Mr. McCarthy,
No. So your question gets asked, and were you directing it at the
Staff.
chair per Robert's rules?
No, it's staff, because it's a staff, means staff is going to have to tell us what the options are.
Okay, then I'm going to ask Ms. Reese to respond.
Sure. As I understand the question, it is what are residents' options if they believe there's a safety concern because of traffic?
Because this road was extended into this adjoining neighborhood. So what are the town's?
Right. So I
Assumptions.
would have to make some assumptions about what the safety concerns would be. So we could go with speeding or quantity of cars. The options would be contacting the police department, non-emergency phone number. You can contact administration, and we would then notify the chief and the police department. Could send an email, so phone call, email, website, variety of ways that residents can submit concerns seeking town staff to address them.
Okay, and what is the speed limit in this neighborhood?
30.
30.
So 30 miles an hour. And all we're going to be able to do is call the police. All right, thank you.
Please,
I have one.
Mr. Preston.
All right.
Why not?
Yep, I just want to wrap up this with a piece that hasn't been really discussed tonight, but I do think that it is a good thing when good developers want to invest in your town. And that piece, though it has not been a topic of conversation, and with with good reason, I've had substantive questions on this as well, but that piece has been lost in this conversation, and I think that is something that is a positive. I am glad to see it. I'm glad to see they're engaging with the neighbors, and I am optimistic that with how this process has transpired so far, that those conversations I hope will continue moving forward. But just wanted to throw that out there and give that acknowledgement of people choosing to take the risk and invest in the town of Normal as overall a very positive thing that I'm glad to see happen.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
No.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye. And the proposal passes. We have no items of new business this evening, and we had no public commenters. So before entertaining a motion to adjourn, we'll go to council concerns. Ms. Smith.
I just want to highlight that Virginia Avenue and the Constitution Trail under the Camelback Bridge are going to be closed for some repairs to the Camelback Bridge. So be aware of that if you're driving and trying to get to the hospital from Linden, or if you're on the trail, the access points onto the trail off of Virginia will be blocked, and I'm not sure how far north or south of that they will be blocked, but just be mindful of that.
Mr. Preston.
This is our first meeting since Sweet Corn Circus, and would just like to give a shout out to staff and volunteers who put many countless hours into another great year at Sweet Corn Circus. Thank you to all for that. I was glad to enjoy it with my family on one of the days, not on the other. It was great. Thanks.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. I expect that people recognize what I'm holding up. It's your property tax assessment increase. Everyone in the town of Normal got a 5.99 increase on their property tax assessment. So the reason I bring this up is the next time that staff bring the property tax levy to us, please bring it to us and ask us how much additional dollars we're going to be increasing our levy by. Because since the assessed values went up, that means that the taxable rate is probably going to go down, because in the original vote that we had, staff had estimated a 2.5% increase in EAV, and this is nearly a 6% increase, which means our rate is going to show lower. So please don't bring this back to us in November asking us to keep it at like the rate that it was the year before. Keep the argument consistent. I had gone back and looked, and this last cycle was the first time that it was argued, at least as far back as I had gone, that we wanted to keep the rate the same instead of we were going to increase or decrease the property tax levy by a certain dollar amount. So I just like the argument to remain consistent. We're either going to tax more dollars or less dollars, but not worry about the rate, because we have no control over that. Thank you.
Ms. Reese, yep.
Just to clarify, when we do come to council toward the end of the year with our proposed property tax levy, the levy, which is what council adopts, is a dollar amount. That's what we identify. And as part of that conversation, every council report, in the spirit of transparency and giving council all the information relevant to make a decision, not only do we tell you the dollar amount to adopt for the levy, but we also play that out into the anticipated rate. So council always has both the rate and the levy.
I'll entertain a motion
So moved for adjournment?
for adjournment.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye, and we are adjourned.